If a book is popular, you don't have to go out of your way to find out what people think about it because it's going to be everywhere. Haven't heard a single person talk about this book. I need to go turn my camera off. It would be awesome if I could, you know, get up to do that. Whenever you're ready, it's fine, no rush. Hello and welcome back, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. Today I'm going to be going over all of my goals and such that I set for 2023. So if you were interested to see what those goals were and whether or not I accomplished them, then keep on watching. So 2023 was my first full year of reading ever in life. And knowing that this was going to be my first full year, I kind of set my goals pretty low, and I think I'll continue to set my goals relatively low. I don't want to set my goals so high and then not meet them and then be discouraged and then stop reading. I'm going to go through a lot of the different stats, like I said, goals, some of the different videos that I did, setting myself up for like what I wanted to read for the year, and we're gonna see how well I stuck to these things. All of the stats that I'm going to be talking about are going to be stats that I'm pulling from StoryGraph. For the most part, all of my like books and like being able to track how many books I'm reading or when I start, when I finish, how many books I've read in a particular month or time frame or whatever, it's pretty much all captured into StoryGraph. So that's what I'm going to be using. General stats for 2023, it looks like my goal was 48 books that I wanted to read for the year, and that was kind of based on how many books I typically read in a month. I usually read about 4 to 8 books in a month. It really depends on what's going on in the month. Not only did I hit that goal, but I like blew it out of the water. I did like more than double what I originally set out to do. I am just so blown away, and honestly I would not have read this many books if it was not for Rainey's Get a Clue Readathon. Like, I read 30 books in that month alone, so that definitely made up a lot of what these books are. So thank you so much to Rainey for kind of pushing me to read more books that I otherwise definitely would not have read. So yeah, I read 105 books, as you guys can see there. And then looking at these stats for like the number of books, the pages, 29,000, over 29,000. I read almost 30,000 pages. That's crazy. And also, just for context, the number of pages read is slightly off. I read Secret Circle, and the version or the edition of Secret Circle that I read, I couldn't find as a paperback or whatever in StoryGraph, so I just used the audiobook version of it. That's why it says that. I definitely read way more than 7.5 hours worth of audiobooks in 2023, but I typically hybrid read, so I don't log my hours read because I don't really care. I log like my number of books in page count. So just note that page count is actually probably supposed to be a little bit higher, not significantly, but maybe like 200 or 300 or 400 pages more. And then when I look at my like moods or any of these kind of like charts, I usually just try to look at like the top 5-ish just to kind of see like what is leading the way. So it looks like the biggest one that's on here is dark. That's the biggest mood. That is the biggest mood, honestly. Emotional, okay. Mysterious, makes sense. Reflective, okay. Tense, I mean, tense would probably go along with the mysterious and dark. I imagine if I'm reading mysterious and dark books, they're probably also pretty tense. And lighthearted, which is interesting that like lighthearted and tense look like they're about the same amount. So I guess I equally read both intense and lighthearted books, which is great because that means that I'm kind of like balancing out my reading, so that's good. I would like ideally for funny to be higher on the list for the end of 2024. That would be nice if I could read more funny books. I feel like it's hard to find funny books, which is the reason why I read a lot of rom-coms, because that's like the only genre that I know of that is like supposed to at least be funny. But I'd like to find more funny books. Moving on to the pace, I read mostly medium paced books, which makes sense. A couple of fast-paced books, and that fast section, the reason why that section is so big, again, goes back to the Get a Clue Readathon. And then slower paced books, I'm actually not sure what, let me look at that. What is that? I wouldn't describe I'm Afraid of Men as a slow-paced book, but okay. Gentle and Lowly. The Cartography of Sudden Death I also would not necessarily describe as slow. Okay, The Hunger, maybe. Baking Spirits Bright was not slow. Who creates these categories? This is so inaccurate. Baking Spirits Bright was definitely not slow paced, but okay. Anyway, moving on. Page number, Again, most of the books that I read were between 300 and 499 pages. I read a couple of books, like a handful of books that were over 500 pages, and I read a good number of books that were under 300 as well. What were the books that were over 500? Oh yeah, that makes complete sense. Moving on to audiobook length, I don't, like I said, track this. I don't care about this. This is not a stat that I pay attention to. Fiction versus nonfiction, though, is one that I do try to pay attention to. So obviously I read more fiction books than I did nonfiction. Nonfiction is not a genre that I'm necessarily drawn to, so I'm glad that I read quite a few of them in the year. Genres. This is always a fun section to review. So romance is leading the way. And I just want to clarify that I am not a romance girly, okay? I am a rom-com, and I like reading rom-coms for the comedy, which I already talked about earlier. So I guarantee you that the majority of the books in that section are specifically rom-coms. They're not just like general romance stories. Fantasy is number 2, not surprised. Contemporary being number 3 is interesting, but I guess a lot of the books that I read are contemporary. Also, I don't even fully know what contemporary really means, because does contemporary mean like it's set like in present day? Because how does that work, right? Like, let's say I read a book that's set in 2023. 15 years from now, 30 years from now, will that book still be considered contemporary? I don't really understand how that genre works. But anyway, thriller is number 4. You guys know that rom-coms and like thriller mystery are my go-to genres. Mystery being this low, though, is kind of shocking to me, because in my opinion, if thriller is that high, I don't see how mystery isn't like right up there with it. Because I feel like you can't have a thriller that's not mysterious. You could have a mystery that's not a thriller, because like you have cozies. But like, I don't feel like you can have a thriller that isn't mysterious. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. They should be right next to each other, because the same books that are in the thriller category should also be in the mystery category, but whatevs. LGBTQ+, yeah, definitely read a couple of those. Now, I don't know if this category is tracking if the book has LGBTQIA+ rep in the book, or if it's tracking whether or not it's written by an LGBTQIA+ author. Either way, I would imagine that quite a few books in this category are probably also the result of the Get a Clue Readathon, because we got bonus points for reading books that were written by LGBTQIA+ authors, and therefore those stories often had the LGBTQIA+ representation within the story as well. Whether I can get dystopian up higher or science fiction up higher, I'm happy with either one of those. That will be kind of like a unofficial goal for me for next year, or for this year. Moving on, these tags don't really mean anything. These are tags that I created just so that I could track certain things. I don't think that the section up here where it says genres, I don't think that LGBTQIA+ was always a genre on this list. I don't think, which is the reason why I have a tag down here. I created that so that I could track that myself. So I probably could delete that now. And then the series tag is one. You guys know that I'm doing the year of the series, so I'm trying to track all the books that I am reading that are a part of a series. So that's what that is for. As you can see, it's almost 30 books, not almost 30 series. It's almost 30 books that fall into that category that I read in 2023 that are a part of a series, whether it is a like chronological series or a interconnected standalone series. The format, again, this category doesn't really, I don't really pay much attention to this. I don't really update that very much. Most read authors. This is a fun section. So Sarah J Maas is leading the way with 4 books, which is interesting. Which 4 did I read? Oh yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I was like, what's the 4th one? Frost and Starlight. I forgot I read that. I mean, obviously I read that because I finished the series, but I forgot that that book even existed. Colleen Hoover and Charlie Jane Anders are in 2nd place, which I'm not surprised. The next author, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but that is the author of Death Note, and I read volumes 2, 3, and 4 this year, so that makes sense. Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know that I read One True Loves, but what else did I read by Taylor? Oh, I did read Daisy Jones and the Six. Completely forgot that I read that. N.K. Jemisin, you guys already know I've talked about this author and my experience with this author already. Christina Lauren, and then Abby Jimenez, Queen. L.J. Smith, I just read the first 2 Secret Circle books, and then Stephen Graham Jones. And then we come down to the number of books and pages. This is like one of my favorite things to kind of look at to see like when I got the most reading done. And this chart makes so much sense because the year started off, you know, really well. Things were going great. February, you know, was doing good as well. And then March definitely took a dip. As a lot of you know, I lost 2 of my grandparents like within 2 weeks. Towards the end of March and beginning of April. So yeah, my reading definitely took a huge dip in March and, you know, the beginning of April. And then towards like the middle of April, beginning of May, I had to kind of play catch up to read the books that I said that I was gonna read. So that's why May kind of spiked up. Once I got to June, I was kind of able to like level off, and that's why you kind of see that things were pretty steady up until like September, October. And that's when I went on vacation. I went to Mexico in September, and I went to Georgia in October. And also work picked up like crazy, I'm gonna say around August. So all 3 of those things happening, you know, back to back like that, reading definitely kind of a little bit down, you know. And then you see November, it's a massive, drastic, crazy spike, and that is because of the Get a Clue Readathon. And then again, things kind of like tapered off and kind of normalized back out in December. Moving on to my average ratings. So my average rating is 3.94, which is not bad. I would like for that number to have been higher, because this basically tells me like on average, this is how well I do at like picking out books that I'm gonna like. A couple of books that I did not rate at all. So you guys saw earlier, I read 105 books, and there are only 102 books that were actually rated. And 2 of the books that I did not rate were both N.K. Jemisin books, and I explained why I did not rate those in previous videos. And then the other book that I did not rate, I think it was called Almost Like Christmas or something like that. This book was a book that I was reading but not mentally processing, so when I got to the end I was like, wait, what just happened? So I didn't want to give it a bad rating just because I was mentally checked out. The highest category followed by 3.75 and then 4.5. So although I would like for my highest rating to be a little bit higher than 3.5, I'm not mad at that. So now moving on to my new releases. So this was a kind of like reading challenge that I created for myself just so that I could track the books and I would be able to easily like see what my progress was. So as you can already see, I only completed 3 out of the 8 prompts for this. And I did a whole video in 2022 of the new releases that I was really excited for in 2023 that I wanted to read. And apparently I only read 3 of them, which I did not realize I'd done that bad. But here we are. So I read X's and O's, okay. All the Dangerous Things I read. I did not read How to Sell a Haunted House, and the main reason why I didn't read this, originally I just didn't have time, and then when I could have made time or could have found time to read it, I had just heard so many like not great reviews for this book where it was no longer a pressing issue. So I'm not really mad that I didn't get to this last year because I don't know, I'm not as incentivized or as motivated to read it as I was back when it had first debuted. I'll get to it when I get to it. Same thing with Christina Lauren, The True Love Experiment. It was kind of the same thing. I just heard a lot of like very mid, very like subpar reviews. A lot of people said that the Soulmate Equation was actually better, which I haven't read. So again, just not pressed to pick this up right now. I did read Once More with Feeling, and what did I give this? 4.25 stars, which is kind of hilarious because I know a lot of people did not like this book. Clearly, I am not one of those people and I quite enjoyed it. Love Theoretically. It wasn't that I didn't want to read it or I lost motivation. I just didn't get around to reading it. But the flip side to that, you know, full circle moment, is that I am currently reading Love Theoretically this month for my book club, the So Shelf Center book club. So that is what we're reading for January. So it's still going to get read. It just missed the 2023 deadline by a month. Only one left is the next one. I did not read this book. The reason why I did not read this book is actually the opposite reason of the reason why I didn't read the other books. And it's because I've heard so many great things about this book that I wanted to make sure that I had time to read this and I wasn't rushing through it. Also, I have a video idea for this book, and so that's another reason why I haven't picked it up. And then the last one is One of Us is Back by Karen M. McManus, and this was a book that, again, I wasn't pressed to read. I actually have not heard a single person talk about this book, which is kind of concerning. This is the third book in a series. I have already read the first two. I definitely plan to read this year, because with this being the year of the series, this would be a really easy book that I could read to be able to knock that series out and be completely done with that series, unless she drops another book, which I don't know if she will. But yeah, I haven't heard anybody talk about this book, so again, I'm not upset that I didn't get around to this. It is what it is, but I do plan on prioritizing this at some point this year because I want to be able to check this series off my list. Next up are my year-long readathons that I was participating in, and so I was participating in the like choose your own adventure readathon for the magical readathon, like the Aurelium readathon that's hosted by Book Roast. I was doing that, and then I also was doing Buzzwordathon. So just going through Buzzwordathon, for January the prompt was Life and Death. I read Death Note 2. For February the prompt was a verb, so I read Passing by Nella Larson. March the word was Secret. I read Every Last Secret by A.R. Tor. I'm literally doing this off of memory. I mean, I have the list of what the words were, but like in terms of what the book was that I read and who the author was, just going off of memory. April was an emotion. I read How to Date Men When You Hate Men by an author whose name I don't remember, but maybe I'll put it up on the screen and you can see it. For May it was a flavor, so I did Before the Coffee Gets Cold by, oh gosh, what is that author's name? Toshikazu Kawaguchi or something like that. For June, the word was Other. I read A Hundred Other Girls by Imani Hararikia. For July, it was a weather word. I read Every Last Summer. Is that what it's called? Every Summer After, sorry. Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. For August, it was Body Parts, and I read Seven Faceless Saints by M.K. Lobb. For September, it was a word that had to do with like games, so I read Ace of Spades by an author whose name I know but have no idea how to pronounce, so I'm not going to try to say it. I'll just pop it in on the screen so you can see it. For October, it was a word that had to do with like magic, so I did The Kiss Curse by Aaron Sterling. November was Good. I read Good Omens. I did read it. I did not finish it. For December, it was a sound related word, and I read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I don't know how to say his name. For the Choose Your Own Adventure for January, it was I picked the prompt to do finish or start a series, and I read A Court of Frost and Starlight. For February, I did the prompt that was nothing but words on the cover, and for that I read Ace by Angela Chen. For March, I chose to read a book that had a rating over 4.3 stars on Goodreads. I read Hood Feminism by Mickey... I don't know what the author's name was. I'll pop it up on the screen. For April, we had a break because that was the actual first semester of Aurelium for the Magical Readathon. For May, I had to read a book that ends on an even or an odd number, and I read so many books that it literally doesn't matter. I could pick any book that I read in the month of May and it wouldn't matter. For June, it was a book you already own. For that, I read The Black Hamptons by Carl Weber. For July, it was read a book when it's daylight. Again, I read during the day and I read during the night, so I literally could pick pretty much any book that I read in that month and it would fit the bill for this. For August, we had a break because that was the second semester for the Aurelium Magical Readathon. For September, it was read a Dark Academia book. I read Ace of Spades. For October, I had to read a book that the chapters have titles. I read Mr. Magic by Kirsten White. For November, it was read a mystery or a thriller. I read And Then We Were None, and Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And then for December, it was read a book with fire in the title. And, what was that book called? I Survived the Great Chicago Fire, I don't know, it was a year, whatever year the fires were. That's the title of the book. I'll pop it up on the screen. I also don't remember who the author is, so again, it's on the screen. So that was the completion of the year-long readathons that I did. Next up were my actual reading goals, like just my general reading goals that I set for the year of 2023. I did this whole video, I think it was back in 2022, where I talked about what my goals were going to be. I like literally sat down with you guys and kind of created my goals for the year in real time. So based on the goals that I set for myself for 2023, let's see which ones I completed and which ones I didn't. So the first one was to read an anthology. That I did do. I read Assassin's Blade, which is technically an anthology because it's a collection of short stories. The next one was to read at least 2 horror books, which I actually well surpassed that. Surprisingly, I wasn't even expecting that. but I read How to Survive Your Murder by Daniel Valentine, which was really good. The Backbone of the World, which was really weird. Mr. Magic, which was also weird, but also really good in my opinion. The Hunger, which I ate that up. It was like a horror soap opera. I loved it. Night of the Mannequins, also super weird. There's No Way I'd Die First was a debut that I really enjoyed. I highly recommend this if you are looking for like a black horror, black slasher type of book. It was really good. R.L. Stein's, what is this, Fear Street, for the Cheerleaders, The First Evil. This was super cringy, but also like fun. It was just a fun read. I enjoyed it. Tender is the Flesh. Y'all know that I hated that book. We won't get into it. And Comfort Me with Apples, also super weird. Next was to read at least 2 Christian books. I failed at this. I only read 1 out of the 2, which is most unfortunate because the fact that I only set the goal at 2 and I couldn't even do that, I'm very disappointed in myself. So, need to do better in 2024. The next one was to read at least 5 manga. I also did not complete this because I only read 4. Missed it by this much, like literally tripped at the finish line, was so close. But I read Death Note 2, 3, and 4, and then I also read Black Paradox. Next was to read 5 books out of my comfort zone, and I surpassed that. I did 9. I did Passing, which was a classic, which I don't generally read classics. Night of the Mannequin, which was a horror, which in 2023, horror was not something that I was reading a whole lot of. Same thing with the Wallace Thurman, Black of the Berry, that is also a classic. Middle Grade, that's the reason why The Death and Life of Benny Brooks is on here. I don't read middle grade like that, but I read that middle grade and it was really good. I would actually recommend that book. It was pretty interesting. Comfort Me with Apples, super weird, definitely out of my comfort zone. Like, this book, I have such conflicting feelings about. Backbone of the World was super weird, so that's definitely out of my comfort zone. A Song Built for the Wild, or For the Wild Built, is on this list because it's sci-fi. And I don't generally read sci-fi, like I said earlier, so that's out of my comfort zone. Odd and the Frost Giants by Neil Gaiman is a middle grade, and Dealing with Dragons by Patricia Reed is also a middle grade. Next was to read at least 1 nonfiction book, and I read 8. But yeah, these are all the nonfiction books that I read, and they were all good. I actually enjoyed every single last one of these and would recommend them as well. The next one was to finish at least 3 series. So I did technically do this, even though I didn't finish the series that I said I was going to finish. I did still technically finish 3 series. I started and finished Part of Your World because that is connected with yours truly. I finished Killjoy, which is the novella prequel to the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I finished A Court of Silver Flame, which is the last book in the ACOTAR series thus far. And I read The Kiss Curse, which is the sequel or follow-up companion novel, whatever you want to call it, to The X-Hex by Aaron Sterling. And then I also started and finished It Ends With Us because I read It Ends With Us and I read It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. And then we have the most disappointing section of this video, and that is my 5-star predictions. And this section is particularly disappointing because none of the books that I put on my 5-star predictions list turned out to be 5 stars, and some of them I didn't even read. So here we go. Let's jump into it. So the first book was The Golden Spoon, which I did read, but it was not 5 stars. It was actually 3.5. Didn't really enjoy that. How to Survive Your Murder, I did read. I liked it, but it wasn't 5 stars. It was 4.5. So close, you know, not too bad. And then Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I really had high hopes for this book. I had heard such good things about this book. I really was expecting this to be 5 stars, and it was not. It actually ended up being 3.5. I liked the messaging, but it was super boring to get through it. Next is The Reunion by Kayla Olson. This maybe could be 5 stars, but at the time that I read this, I was just very distracted and wasn't super paying attention to this book. I feel like I didn't give it the attention that it deserved. And so I gave it, what did I give it, like a 3.5? Yeah. I feel like if I reread this book and gave it the attention that it deserves, I probably could rate this higher, but I will give it a second chance at some point. Next was The True Love Experiment, which I did not read. And then Once More with Feeling, which again was good. I enjoyed it. Gave it 4.25 stars, but it wasn't 5 stars. The Inheritance Game, which I did not read. Verity, which I read. I liked it, but it wasn't 5 stars. It was 4.25 stars. And then Good Omens, which I read but didn't finish. And to be honest, this is the reason why this video is just now coming out, because I kept putting off filming this because I wanted to finish Good Omens. Yeah, I still haven't finished that book. I haven't given up on it yet, but I've accepted the fact that this is not a book that I can read right now. And then the last book was The Silent Patient, which was fine. It was decent, you know, 3.75 stars, but sadly not 5 stars. So like, not terrible, but also like could have definitely done better. But you know what, that just gives me motivation for what to make my goals for this year. I already have my ideas prepared. I've actually already filmed that video. I filmed that video before I even filmed this video, because like I said, I was trying to finish Good Omens before I filmed this, but that didn't happen, so I should have just filmed this one first. It is what it is. It's fine. It's, you know, fine. But yeah, that is how 2023 went for me. Let me know how your 2023 was. Let me know whether or not you accomplished your goal. Let me know if we have any goals in common. But that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. Be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. That would help me out so much. And subscribe if you are not already subscribed. I'd love to have you as part of the family. My socials and links, as always, will be linked down below in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.